Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. I know you're all just still getting connected and everything, but I wanted to welcome you. I know people are going to keep joining, but I'll do a little of my intro. So I'm Sarah Chapman, and I'm the executive director of the nonprofit Media Burn Archive, which is based in Chicago. Media Burn collects, preserves, and distributes documentary and experimental media produced by artists, activists, and community groups. And our mission is to create positive social change by amplifying underheard voices, both in contemporary dialogue and the historical record. Before I go any further, I want to let you know that captions are available, and you can access them by looking at the bottom of your screen. There is a little ... button that says more, and if you click that, you can turn on captions if that will help you hear and understand the event better. So the event is being recorded, but only the discussion portion is going to be available later. So you're going to want to pay attention to the whole film because it's the only time you're going to see it right now for the short term. And this event is part of an ongoing free series called Virtual Talks with Video Activists, which we've been doing for about 3 years now, since the start of the pandemic, more than 3 years. And the series creates conversations surrounding media production. So if you enjoy this event, please make sure to join us for our next one in 2 weeks on October 26th for a screening and discussion with Nick DiMartino about the roots of video activism during the 1970s. So tonight, we are pleased to be presenting a screening and discussion of the not yet released documentary film, The Light of Truth, Richard Hunt's Monument to Ida B. Wells. So you are going to be among a select group of people who've gotten to preview it before it's officially released. During the discussion, we'll tell you more about upcoming opportunities to see the full film. And yeah, so we're going to screen about 30 minutes of the film. And then afterwards, we're going to be joined by the film's director/producer, Rana Segal, and producer, Laurie Little. Just to remind you, while we're screening the film, please make sure to stay muted so that we can all hear. If you do not stay muted, we will mute you. You can write questions in the chat anytime during the screening or anytime afterwards. And once we enter the discussion period, you are totally welcome to raise your hand and we'll call on you and you can ask your question out loud because we're a small friendly group and we'd love to have like a nice productive discussion with you afterwards. So with that, I think we're going to start the film. Again, it's about 30 minutes and then we're going to come back for discussion with Rana and Laurie.
Who was this woman who understood that there could be no civil rights without women's rights? Who was this woman who stood against the most barbaric act committable for her era to lynch black men, black women, and yes, black children? Who was this woman who took up her pen and wrote about our rights and marched for them and helped us to get a little bit closer to gaining them? Ida B. Wells.
The monument to Ida B. Wells, I personally think is important, not just because I'm related to her, but because there are very few monuments to women in this country, and when you break it down by race, it's a minuscule number of monuments that represent Black women. The Ida B. Wells Commemorative Art Committee made a decision that we wanted to have the monument be interpretive and abstract because we felt that Ida herself was so multidimensional that we wanted it to not be one pose of hers. And we wanted somebody who was a native Chicagoan, who was familiar with the history of Bronzeville. And so our dream was to get Richard Hunt.
I'm in the design development process of the Ida B. Wells commemorative. The sculpture will be welded and cast bronze and with some granite. This piece will be in a park that's now part of the site of the Ida B. Wells homes, some early public housing, there in the Bronzeville area. The site is on a corner of 37th and Langley. And she lived not far from where this site is.
And one of the things I noticed when it comes to public spaces is that people were starting to go to Ida's gravesite to place "I'd voted" stickers on election day. And then some people were starting to even have little ceremonies on her birthday in the cemetery. And so that made me realize, people really do need a specific location that they can go to in order to honor somebody that they really have respect for. The monument can become a place, a destination that people can feel drawn to and honor her in the way they want to.
Hey everyone. I'd like to welcome Rana Segal and Laurie Little to talk about this film. And since I didn't read your bios, I'd like you to just introduce yourselves. I think people will get really bored if I read the paragraph. So why don't you tell me about yourselves?
Well, okay, where to start? I guess I've been making films since about the 70s. And I went to Columbia College and then I went to NYU, and I was working with a guy named Taggart Siegel for a while, and we did documentaries, ethnographic style documentaries. We did one about
You could talk louder.
Hmong refugees in Uptown, and another one about some Laotian people that were in Rockford that had their Buddhist temple burned and bombed, actually, and we were trying to find out who did that. But that was about racism in a small town, and the Hmong film was about their shaman,
Louder.
and they had just come over from Southeast Asia, and they were in Uptown, and it was quite a shock. But anyway, so I did that for a while, and then I ended up meeting Laurie.
Yeah, so we met at a few years ago at I think it was the Oak Park International Film Festival, and both of us were talking to Michelle Duster about doing a film, and Rana had already just done an amazing film
about Gwendolyn Brooks. It was about the sculpture that's in Gwendolyn Brooks Park, and it was by Margot McMahon. And so Laurie saw it and she said, "Oh, you should work on this film with me." That's about Richard. And I had already been trying to get in touch with Michelle. It turned out that Laurie actually was on the board of directors of the Chicago Women's History Center with Michelle Duster, who is the great granddaughter of Ida B. Wells. And so I knew that this was going on, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so when Laurie saw my film, she said, "Oh, we need to do this." And I said, "Yes." And so we did that. And now we're here.
Yeah. Rana has quite a long list of films she's made about, especially recently, about monuments. I've been making films since forever. I also did a master's at Columbia College in film, and ended up kind of going the documentary route. So I've been doing that for a while. I'm originally from Quebec, Canada, but I've been here for over 30 years now. I teach a couple of classes at Columbia College, and yeah, so it's good to see everybody. Thanks for coming. Nice to see you, Larry. Hi. Well, okay, so Larry had a question. What prompted you to make the film?
Well, as I said, I finished the Gwendolyn Brooks film that was about another sculptor. And so I saw that whole process, and I wove the sculptor's narrative into Gwendolyn Brooks' story. And so we learned about both of them. And that's what I was trying to do with this new film with Richard Hunt and Ida B. Wells. And hopefully it worked out. We'll see. I mean, I don't know what you guys think of it, but
Yeah. So, and also for me, I teach culture, race, and media at Columbia College and have for 20 years now. For some reason, I'm still doing it. And I also teach documenting social injustice. So one of my primary interests is shedding light on, these stories of these really important people who were not written into history books. And so a lot of my students, a lot of people don't know about Ida B. Wells, don't know about Richard Hunt. And for both of us, I think it's really important to talk about new monuments, to lift up people's stories.
well, yeah. And one of the things that I found out when I was working on the Gwendolyn Brooks documentary and sculpture was that at that time, there was only one other sculpture of a woman, of an actual woman in Chicago. I was, driving down the highway and NPR was on, and it was like, all of a sudden they were talking about it. I was like, oh my God, how is this possible that there are no sculptures that are of actual women except for this one woman who is in Chinatown? And they didn't actually know about her at the time, but she had been there for like a year or so. But anyway, so I thought that it was really important to highlight films about women, but also about the sculptures that need to be made of women.
Right. So
Yeah, it's really interesting how this film operates on those two tracks of this thing about, women's history and honoring women's place in history, but also really about revealing the process of creating art. I mean, that is equally fascinating. Can you talk a little bit about, working with Richard Hunt and getting to film his process and that kind of stuff?
Yes, it was amazing to be working with Richard Hunt, I have to say. He is so prolific. It's incredible. It's like, oh my God. He still is, he's 87 years old now. And he is still making sculpture, even though, he's 87 years old. It's incredible. And but anyway, so he's got a team of people who work with him, and I can't even begin to tell you how many sculptures he was working on when he was working on this. And this got started, by the way, just before COVID started. And so I went with Michelle Duster to Pasadena for the Rose Bowl parade because they were honoring suffragists for the 100th anniversary of the suffrage bill that passed. And so they had a float. They had created this really beautiful float, of course, out of flowers, because it was the Rose Bowl parade. And so Michelle was there because of her great grandmother. And there were, Susan B. Anthony's relatives were there, and Harriet Tubman's relatives, and Frederick Douglass's relatives. I mean, it was an incredible event. But this was like just this float that was in the Rose Bowl parade. But anyway, so, and as soon as we got back, which was, of course, that was January 1st when the parade happened. And then when we got back, like a month later, COVID shut everything down, and pretty much production stopped at that point. And so that was kind of sad, but eventually we were able to sort of get it up and running again.
I think the float won too.
It did.
Year.
Well, there were a lot
of one of the best float awards that year, so that was pretty exciting. Yeah. So.
But anyway, so I guess I didn't answer the question about Richard's process. And so basically, I had been there actually a couple of years before Laurie and I got together, because I knew that he was working on it and I wanted to get an interview with him about it ahead of time. And so he was going to go in a completely different direction, where he wanted to really highlight the lynching aspect of her life. And eventually that, they didn't do that, but so it was, slowly he progressed. He was reading a lot about her. He knew the family, and Michelle had gotten involved with the fundraising, and it was 13 years for them to actually come up with the funding for this sculpture. And so it had been a long process, and but eventually they did get it together, and he just came up with this incredibly beautiful 3-story sculpture that it really kind of blows your mind when you see it in person.
6 tons of bronze in Bronzeville.
So Tempest wanted to know about the archival footage, where it came from, and said it's amazing to see the footage of Richard Hunt in the studio in the 60s.
Yeah, some of it came from Media Burn.
I know, I recognize it.
via PBS, but then there was a film made for Encyclopedia Britannica, and that was, gold. That was the film that really helped me sort of navigate his story in a lot of ways. And there's other things we want to include. We're thinking about expanding this film, but so we're going to need more money for that.
Right. So right now we did a 60-minute cut. Michelle Duster requested that we do a cut to screen for the anniversary of Ida B. Wells' birthday in June. And so we hustled that we got the 60-minute cut done. And so now what we're doing is getting it ready, doing a little bit more work and getting it ready lengthwise to begin submitting to film festivals. So this screening that we're having on Sunday at the Carter G. Woodson Library, which is an event put on by the Chicago Women's History Center, of which Rana and I are both on the board of directors. That is going to be basically our last special preview, kind of work in progress screening before we really prepare it for festival submissions. So we have to be kind of careful about screening it around. And like I said, we're doing a little bit more polishing. And by the way, you had asked about Richard's process in his work. I also wanted to mention that he has done the sculpture that's going to be in the Obama Library, if you guys weren't aware of that. The Emmett Till sculpture to Emmett Till.
Yeah, as I said, he is still working. It's kind of incredible that he's still able to churn this out. It's unbelievable.
And when I went to the brand new Smithsonian Museum to African American History Culture, that sculpture that is massive in the foyer of that museum hangs from the ceiling is Richard Hunt. And if anybody's in DC and gets a chance to visit that beautiful museum, check out his sculpture because it is quite amazing.
Well, and then at the Carter G. Woodson Library, there are several Richard Hunt sculptures there, and one of them is highlighted in the film, and it is Jacob's Ladder. And it's partially in the ceiling, and then it's on the floor as well.
Yeah, it's huge. It kind of moves up into the atrium. It's quite amazing. It's huge. Yeah.
Wow. And I just wanted to say about that industrial film, the Encyclopedia Britannica film, that was like the one that was like hosted by Studs Terkel, right?
No, that's something different.
Oh, well, you should check that out on our website. There is an industrial film from the 50s or 60s where Studs Terkel goes to Richard Hunt's studio and interviews Richard as well as his wife.
I actually saw that recently, yes.
Okay, yeah, it's really great. It's so cool.
Yeah, in fact, the biographer, John Ott, mentioned it to me.
Hmm.
So he liked it a lot.
So yeah, so you'd put in the chat, there's a link to that screening this weekend. So anyone who saw this and wants to see the rest of it, sounds like that's your chance, for the next few years or so before it does
Hopefully
per
not that.
year, whatever. Festivals take a long time to happen. So you should definitely check that out if anyone can make it to that screening on Sunday.
And that's the poster.
Yeah. And oh, by the way, we're also going to, where our plan is also after the festival run is, and we'll try and do a premiere, hopefully in Chicago. But what we'd like to do is then also, we're building a website with an educational, interactive educational page to take to museums and kind of approach museums and colleges and schools, because of the nature of the film. It seems to kind of would fit nicely in doing that kind of outreach.
For sure. And not to spoil the rest of the film for everyone, but could you talk a little bit about the completion of the monuments and like the unveiling and all of that kind of stuff?
Sure. Well, we went down to Holly Springs and Memphis and shot that summer of 2021. And then we came back and videotaped the installation, which is in really the second half of the film, the installation of the monument. And then we videotaped the unveiling ceremony, where we have wonderful interviews with Preckwinkle and
Nicole Hannah Jones.
Amazing.
And
Lori Lightfoot is in the film, of course, talking
this
about
is at the
importance
dedication.
At the dedication ceremony. So that's in the film, the second half of the film. Kind of as it unfolds, we see the sculpture being made and then taken to the site, installed, and then unveiled.
Yeah, and then unveiled. It's pretty amazing to see it. We've got a lot of drone shots, and it's quite lovely.
Yeah.
We think so anyway.
Magnificent sculpture. So we're trying to bring attention to the importance of this, and also if people would like to see the sculpture and visit it, and it's wonderful for a bike ride, or it's Langley and 35th. What is it? I'm sorry. It's Bronzeville. I'm trying to remember the cross street.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up.
But it's quite, yeah, it's a really cool park. It is where the Ida B. Wells homes were.
Right.
So we're having a moment.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? We'd love to hear from you. I know we know some of you, and you're all family and friends here, so please feel free to
yeah, it's at 37th and Langley, sorry.
37th and Langley.
Yeah.
Do you have any interesting stories about the making of the film? Anything unexpected that happened, or anything that just really sort of surprised or wowed you that someone said? Or sorry, that's sort of a hard question.
I do want to read something that Nicole Hannah Jones said.
Yeah, wonderful.
So she says at the very end of the film, we create monuments because we want monuments to tell us how we see ourselves as a nation, what we want to believe, and who we think we are important. So the fact that across this country we don't have monuments to the enslaved, but those that enslaved them, that across this country we don't have monuments to the people who died in the struggle for liberation, but actually to the people who they had to fight against to get that liberation. And we are seeing those monuments coming down. we have to not leave an empty space there. We have to fill in those spaces with true Americans that fought for the ideals of liberty and freedom. Well, I kind of botched that up, but yeah, she says it much better in the film.
Yeah, wonderful. I think that's the kind of the gist of what, what really moves us is also what we've just lived through. After, the pandemic and the murder of George Floyd and a number of other, many other people who, it's like modern day lynching. When we look at lynching and what it is about, and the Black Lives Matter movement, and now, what we'd like to do is try and well, shed light on what's going on with these monuments being made.
Well, yeah. And one of the other things that happened while the film was being made was that finally, after, so many years, the anti-lynching bill was actually passed, and Michelle Duster was actually at the White House when Biden signed the bill.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool.
So
Because it's something that Ida had been fighting for all of her life, basically.
Larry wants more details about Sunday's event. It's at the Woodson Library, right?
Yeah, Carter G. Woodson Library, 95th and Halsted. And there's a link there. So you do need to click on the link and register. And yeah, it's wonderful because it starts at 2 p.m. and but you'll be able to go in and see Jacob's Ladder and his other works before and after the film screening. So thanks, Sarah. Yeah.
And Michelle Duster will be there.
Yeah, so we'll have a Q&A afterwards. So it'll be Ron and Michelle Duster and I, on stage. And then again, Chicago Women's History Center has celebrated their 50th anniversary this year. And Marianne Johnson, who's the president of the board, is also a producer on the film. So we're very much involved with working with Chicago Women's History Center with this project. So if you can make it down to 95th and Halsted, it'll be worth it. It's a beautiful, it's a beautiful library.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you so much for sharing this with us tonight. This was wonderful. I know a lot of our attendees enjoyed it as well, getting some claps and things. So yeah, if you can check this out on Sunday at the library, and if not, just sort of stay tuned for future updates about the film.
Great.
Thank
Well,
you all
thank you,
for coming.
everybody. Thanks. We'll see you at the screenings in the next few years or Sunday. Okay, take care, everybody.
All right, good night, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye, thanks.